Now, in a couple videos that I've recently done concerning atheism, I have pointed out how many modern Western atheists essentially live double lives. How, while they claim to be atheists, they really live more like Christians. Naturally, this has generated some heated comments in the comments section. And yet, what most don't seem to realize is that it's just not me pointing this out. Over 100 years ago, the atheist who famously declared that God was dead said the same of the atheists of his day. Friedrich Nietzsche was born in October of 1844. He grew up in a religious household, his father being a Lutheran minister who unfortunately died when Nietzsche was only 5. He was then raised by his mother and sister. It is said of the young Nietzsche that at school chapel he could read the scriptures with such passion that he would bring his listeners to tears. At age 20, he went and studied theology, in which he then became an atheist. Now, Nietzsche lived around the time of Charles Darwin and his groundbreaking book on the origins of species. Yet, while many atheists celebrated what they now saw as an explanation of life without the need for a supernatural creator, being a philosopher, Nietzsche had a much more gloomy perspective, and here's why. The traditional Judeo-Christian view is that humans and animals are completely separate. We're in two separate categories altogether. Humans are special, created in God's likeness. We have souls, whereas animals, well, they're just animals. When a lion kills a gazelle, it's not murder. But when a human kills another human, it is. But of course, Darwinism completely upset that apple cart. There was no longer this distinction between humans and animals. And what Nietzsche saw that many of his fellow atheists failed to see were the ethical implications. Not only was Darwinism a game changer in biology, but also in ethics. You see, like many online atheists today, the atheists of Nietzsche's day thought that rejecting the belief in God, well, that was no big deal, no major consequences, no major rethink required. And rejecting Christianity, that just meant no longer believing in angels and demons, heaven and hell. But Nietzsche said no, it went much further than that. It meant rejecting the entire ethical foundation of Christianity, which Western civilization was built upon. It meant rejecting what Jesus said in his famous Sermon on the Mount of blessed are the meek, the poor, the underdog. Those things had to be rejected and replaced. Nietzsche wrote a famous poem concerning everything that I've just said called The Madman, and I highly encourage you to Google it and read it for yourself. In broad daylight, with a lit lantern in hand, a madman comes rushing into a marketplace, crying, "I seek God! I seek God!" Now, many of those standing there were atheists, and they thought it was pretty funny, and they began to mock the madman. But with a piercing stare, the madman said to them, "Whither is God? I will tell you, we have killed him, you and I. We are all his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us a sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is not night continually closing in on us? Do we not need to light lanterns in the morning? You see, to Nietzsche, being an atheist meant much more than just not believing in any deities. It had far-reaching consequences, and yet most of his contemporaries just didn't get it. And in this poem, he ends by the madman throwing his lantern to the ground and breaking it into pieces. "I have come too early," he said. "My time is not yet." This tremendous event is still on its way, still wandering. It has not yet reached the ears of men. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars requires time. Deeds, though done, still require time to be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than most distant stars, and yet they have done it themselves. This tremendous event that Nietzsche spoke of that had not yet come, that was still beyond the most distant stars, did eventually come with a bloody vengeance upon the Western world in the 20th century. The most horrific example being Adolf Hitler, who would give the writings of Nietzsche as gifts to both Stalin and Mussolini. Now, Nietzsche was no anti-Semitic. He would have disagreed with Hitler on many, many issues. Nevertheless, his basic prophecy that a time would come when Christian ethics, which undergirded Western civilization, would be cast aside and replaced by our Darwinian ethics, well, that was undeniably fulfilled under the Nazis. Prophets of doom have few friends, and this was certainly the case with Nietzsche, who became more and more isolated as he grew older. And then in 1889, tragedy struck. He had a mental breakdown, which he never recovered from until his death in 1900 at age 55. While obviously I don't agree with Nietzsche's atheism, I couldn't agree more, though, with his assessment of what it actually means to be an atheist. That it means much more than just not believing in any deities. More specifically, rejecting the God of Christianity. Well, it's like that thread on a sweater. Pull it, and everything unravels. Forgot to mention that everything that I've said about Darwinism does not necessarily make it untrue in the biological sense. There are many Christian scientists who think that, such as Francis Collin, who headed up the Genome Project, as well as authoring the book, The Language of God. Sorry for any confusion, and thanks for watching.